Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be going over Alibaba, Baidu, and why I sold all my Chinese stocks. But before we get into it, if you could smash the like button, it really helps the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, definitely subscribe. Let's get into it. So to start, rather than waste time, I just want to show you the losses and gains that I have throughout the year. So I pulled this directly from my E-Trade. All the trades I've done on Alibaba and Baidu combined throughout the entire year on the main account. We had a total gain of 25,000 on Baidu because I had some very successful trades earlier in the year as it was going up, but then I had some big losses later in the year. For Alibaba, we have a loss of $66,737.18, so obviously took quite a loss on Alibaba. Now, it would have been more of a loss if I didn't have some gains earlier in the year on it as well. The total loss when you add Baidu and BABA for my Chinese stocks combined was $41,518.98 exactly. So I decided to cut my loss. My total loss of 41K was well worth cutting the loss now in comparison to how bad it could be if I decide to hold on. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering why cut my loss, like what has changed? And basically, it's just the news that's been coming out more and more. So recently, some news came out that I read, and I kind of decided, you know what, this is where I draw the line. So Alibaba pledged 15.5 billion to Common Prosperity. Now, basically, as you can see here, it says Alibaba Group Holdings pledges 100 billion won, which is $15.5 billion USD, over 5 years towards Xi Jinping's Common Prosperity vision, becoming the latest tech giant to bankroll China's broad aim to share the wealth. Now, this is great for China as a whole, I think, but it's not great for Alibaba. It's not great for private companies. And just, you know what, it adds too much risk that it's no longer just going to be a slap on the wrist. This is going to be a massive change for basically to stay for a long time to come. So when you look at Alibaba, when you look at Baidu, all these Chinese stocks, their stocks are great values fundamentally. But the thing is, I don't know if that's going to stay the case with all these changes. They're trading, for example, Alibaba has a PE of 20, but if they're going to be sharing the wealth so much, maybe that PE is going to change to much higher very quickly. We don't know. There's still a lot of uncertainty around that. And getting a PE of 20 is really, really great when you have such growth that Alibaba has, for example. It has insane growth, so PE of 20 is super cheap. But the government worry, it doesn't feel temporary. You know, it feels more like a permanent change of procedure. Now, when I started buying Alibaba when it was dipping and getting, pretty cheap, a lot of it, I saw that fine of $2.8 billion that Alibaba paid, and it was a record fine at the time. So I kind of thought that that fine was going to be, it's a record fine, but I thought it was a small price to pay to move forward. And I thought that's exactly what would happen. I thought they'd be moving forward. But unfortunately, since then, we've just had a lot more to come. They started forcing tutoring companies to become nonprofits. And I started to realize, you know what, this is going to get a lot worse. The government is thinking on a long-term basis. They don't care about short-term. And the more I thought about that, I just realized the fundamentals aren't worth the risk, especially when you can find similar values in the US. So in the US market, I can find companies with equal or even better price to earnings ratios than 20, but the thing is most of those companies don't have the same growth track record as Alibaba does. I could also find companies that have equal growth as Alibaba, but then they usually trade at a higher price to earnings. And the truth is, I'd rather have either of these options at this point. So I sold my position in Alibaba and in Baidu, and I decided I'd rather pay a little more for a US company that doesn't have the risk, or pay a better price, but just not get as much growth. As far as upside's concerned, if you did hold Alibaba through this pain, what is the upside on the, when this is all said and done down the road? If things do, have an optimistic future? Well, if things go perfectly, I think you have probably a quick doubling in the price because it is pretty cheap. And then over the very long run, maybe you get a 5 to 10x if this, becomes one of the most valuable companies in the world. If Alibaba becomes a $3-4 trillion company and really is running the world like an Amazon does, but we're talking about just continued growth and perfect execution going forward. But if you're going to be that optimistic and assume everything goes, to normal and their growth stays perfect and they do become this huge company, well, then if you're going to take that optimism to any other stock in the US, I mean, I could point a lot of stocks that have potential to 5 to 10x, as long as they keep executing really well. So then it becomes, why take this unnecessary risk? And the question becomes, should you stay in the stock? And for all of you out there, I can't answer this for you. You all have to make your own decisions. I'm not a financial advisor, but for me, I think this stock is cheap, but if you look at the risk versus the upside, it's not as good as I originally thought. I think you can get similar upside without nearly as much risk in a lot of US companies. Now, I always say it's better to cut my losses quick than stay in something I no longer believe in. And as far as the very long run, I do think the Chinese economy will continue to grow, and these stocks very well may be huge winners looking back if we go, 5, 10 years out. And I hope they are winners for everyone who does hold this stock. But for me, I'm willing to take a loss. I'm willing to take a 40 plus $1,000 loss and move on and put my money into things that don't have the same risk or the same worries and have massive potential as well. Now, if you made it to the end, smash the like button. It really helps the YouTube algorithm. I could use all the likes I can after taking that big L, and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate you all. I read every comment you drop. If you have any questions or anything you want to ask, just drop it in the comments. Until next time.